Okay, everyone, brilliant. Thank you for joining us. So welcome to February's Scibar. And this month, I'm delighted to introduce Veronique Couttee. So Vero is a Mauritian biologist who's worked on bird conservation and invasive species management projects in Mauritius and the Seychelles. In 2018, she secured the prestigious Fulbright Scholarship to study a Masters in Biodiversity, Conservation and Policy in the US. And Vero is now working for the National Audubon Society, helping to develop mapping solutions to create bird-friendly communities bird-friendly communities. So hopefully her internet is being a bit more reliable now, and I can hand you over to her. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Claire. I did turn off my camera because my internet was being slightly choppy. If there's any issue, please post it in the chat or let me know, Mike, and I can try and switch connections.
Yeah,
so
will do.
Please don't hesitate to be like, we can't see anything anymore. So I'm going to present today on environmental conservation in Africa, and the kind of tagline around this is empowering local voices in science. Before we start, I'd like to actually pull out the first poll, Mike, if you're ready. So I want to know how many of you are familiar with the term territory acknowledgement. I just don't want to be throwing a lot of jargon out there, but I just want to know, like, this is not like a pop quiz, so just give your honest answer.
I think you're gonna have to explain it.
Whoever says no will have to give a full explanation.
Yeah. We've got, so it should come up on your screen. You should be able to see and involve. So, so far, one person on the call is familiar with the term.
It's me. So.
Did you vote?
Yeah, I was like, why not?
Okay, I'll end it there and share it. I should be able to share it and you should all be able to see. Can you see?
Awesome, thank you. So
there you go. You've got a bit of explanation.
So now I will proceed, since I've seen a bit of the results. I feel like most of you are not familiar with like the proper explanation for what is the territory acknowledgement. So I will give it to you and I will do one. So a territory acknowledgement is a way that people insert an awareness of Indigenous presence and land rights in everyday life. This is often done at the beginning of ceremonies, lectures, or any public event. It can be a subtle way to recognize the history of colonialism and a need for change in settler colonial societies. So I am currently presenting from Florida, and I will show you where on the map. So I am currently located in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is just here. And I want to acknowledge that I'm doing this presentation from the land of the Seminole tribe of Florida, who are the only tribe that are known as the unconquered tribe of Florida, and because they are the only tribe in the United States that didn't sign a peace treaty, and they are a federally recognized tribe in the United States. I'm also doing this presentation on the land of the Tocobaga tribe of Tampa Bay. They went extinct around 1500s after the arrival of Spanish settlers in their area. So I invite you to use the nativeland.ca resource in this map, which is this wonderful interactive map that allows you to explore all Indigenous lands everywhere in the world. And it is a great resource if you're seeking to do a territory acknowledgement, but also for educational purposes. I want to say also that all these links are in this story map, the platform that I'm using for this presentation, will be made available for you. So if you're curious to know more about the Seminole tribe of Florida or the Tocobaga tribe of Florida, I have included links, as well as link to the Native Land app So I will scroll down. Mike, can you pull the second poll, please? And I won't vote this time, so.
Again, it should be on your screen, tablet, whatever you got. Just click whether you're a yes, no, vaguely, or not sure. A bit of a reverse this time. I'll show you the polls in a second. We're almost there. Okay, that's everyone except me and you.
So we have pretty good understanding of the term and this goal. I'm very glad to hear that. Honestly, I'm doing this talk and there's going to be a lot of talk around equity, diversity, and inclusion, ED&I, and Black, Indigenous, people of color. So I did want to go over those definitions because I think jargon can be a huge barrier in trying to present research or present findings to like a wide audience. I don't want to assume like, it's not an assumption of your level of understanding. I just want to have clear communication between what I'm working on and what your understanding is. So as I mentioned, the term BIPOC is something that I may refer to, which stands for Black, Indigenous, people of color. Equity, diversity, and inclusion. Equity stands for the guarantee of fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement, while at the same time striving to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented the full participation of some groups. Diversity is the psychological, physical, and social differences that occur among any and all individuals, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, socioeconomic status, education, marital status, language, age, gender, sexual orientation, mental or physical ability, and learning style. And lastly is inclusion, which is the act of creating environments in which any individual or group can be and feel welcome, respected, supported, and valued to fully participate and bring their full authentic selves to work. So I do invite you to, I will post the presentation in the chat actually. So if at any moment you're like, I don't remember what any of this mean, by all means, like you can refer to it again. Actually, can you post it for me, Mike? It's easier for me than having to exit my full screen, if you don't mind.
You sent it to me, or to Claire and I, hadn't you?
Yeah, or maybe no.
Yeah, you carry on. We'll find it and make it happen if you haven't sent it.
Okay. Okay. Great. So I'll close this. So what is the purpose and process and outcome that I'm expecting out of this talk? Is the purpose is for me to share my personal and professional experience as it relates to ED&I, but also justice work in the environmental conservation and science sector. The process with which I want to go about this is I want this to be a discussion and a sharing opportunity in a safe space. Understanding that we come here with different perspective, different work experience, personal experiences, and inner experiences. And that my story is very unique to who I am and represents who I am. And the outcome that I'm hoping out of this talk is that you will learn and hopefully apply tools and practices and policies that make science and environmental actions more inclusive. Before I jumped into my story, I do want to read this wonderful quote from Ayana Johnson and Katharine Wilson, that are the lead authors on this wonderful book called All We Can Save. And it says the following: the same patriarchal power structure that oppresses and exploits girls, women, and non-binary people, and constrict and control boys and men, also wreak destruction on the natural world. Dominance, supremacy, violence, extraction, egotism, greed, ruthless competition, These hallmarks of patriarchy fuel the climate crisis just as surely as they do inequality, colluding with racism along the way. It's a beautiful quote, and it really sums one of a core principle of what took me to do what I do in my career now. This kind of framework of injustice and the very dominant male-like structure within which we operate and we have to work in today's scientific world and in a lot of other fields. But before we start with the really kind of heavier stuff, I want to do some lighthearted introduction of my story. And my story plays a huge role in who I am today as a scientist. My identity is like why I do the work that I do, right? And it actually starts on a small island called Mauritius, which is east of Madagascar. And excuse me if you know where it is, but I've spent my whole 3 years in the United States explaining where it is. So, because most people don't know that it exists. And I started on a smaller islet, which is actually east of Mauritius, called Îles aux Écrêtes. It's a 27-hectare island situated in the Maibo Bay area. And unlike the rest of the island, which is a volcanic island, Îles aux Écrêtes is made of coralline limestone and is the last remnant of dry coastal forest. And because of that, it has very unique species, including like the Mauritian fody and the Mauritian fruit bat that lives on the island and have a sanctuary to kind of survive, grow, and be protected. And I started my career working on them. And I actually started my career on Îles aux Écrêtes as a volunteer, and I met a bunch of really incredible scientists who were also passionate, kind of a bit crazy sometimes, but really passionate about what they were doing. A lot of them had left the UK to come to Mauritius to like do conservation in the middle of the water. And I was like, what's up with you people? But, you know, no judging there. So that was like the start for me, really. And after that, after quite a bit of experience on the project, I was put in charge of my own translocation project in the Black River National Park, which is part of the 3% of forest that we still have on the island. And I worked with the Mauritius Paradise Flycatcher Translocation Project, which you can see in my hand right now. And we translocated the birds from the forest to the east coast of the island, where they are locally extinct. So as part of the project, we radio track them. So we place a transmitter on their back and follow their movement. And this is kind of my first dab at GIS because I had to radio track them and then map their movement. And this is kind of the first time I really got the opportunity to play around with the GIS. So after my experience in Mauritius, having worked with a lot of invasive species in Mauritius, I did in my head at the time, a huge leap in distance from Mauritius to Seychelles, which I went to the second largest island, Praslin, as you can see on the map. It's very small, 5,000 inhabitants, very tiny island. And at the heart of the island is the Vallée de Mai, which is this Jurassic Park style forest that has like the vestige of natural palm forest. And it's preserved in almost its natural state. And it is the home of the famous coco de mer, which is a palm tree that was once believed to be growing the depth of the sea and the largest seed in the plant kingdom. And as Praslin is also the home of the Seychelles black parrot, the Caton noir. And because I love birds so much, even though I was hired as an invasive species person, I ended up working with birds again, sneakily making my way onto the bird team. And it was a great opportunity again for me to learn about different monitoring protocol, collaborating with communities, and seeing the impact of community work and how the involvement of community work could really like shape the kind of conservation work that I was doing. And I actually this time did a huge leap when I got the Fulbright scholarship and ended up all the way in very cold upstate New York. As you can see, I'm almost in Canada by that point. And It's very, very cold. And I got a Fulbright scholarship to do my master's at the University of Albany. And I met like incredible Fulbright scholars from all across the globe that came to the United States for education opportunities. I wrapped up my master's in 2018 and did a not so big leap, and I went closer, even closer to Canada, to start my work as a Dangerman Fellow. And I worked on mapping solutions with a strong focus for the first time on the ED&I part of using GIS. And as you can see, Montezuma is a wetland complex, which is a birding hotspot for like especially migratory birds that stop there from Canada trying to run away from the cold. And it's on this web of, it's on the cusp of the Ontario Lake, and it has a bunch of finger lakes, and it's still very north. And as you can guess the rest, I did live upstate New York. So that's why I'm in Florida, because it's way too cold. I was not going to tolerate this for much longer. So that's kind of my story. But this story it feeds into a bigger story. It feeds into the community story. And this is where the ED&I part of the work comes in. My lens has been shaped by all these different experiences in Mauritius, Seychelles, and then the United States. Very different and very similar in a lot of ways in terms of the challenges and environmental challenges. So one of the projects that I am currently involved in as a Dangerman Fellow is the Climate Watch US project. So according to the latest report by the National Audubon Society, which is the organization with which I currently work, is that 2/3 of North American birds are vulnerable to extinction due to climate change. So in 2014, after the publication of the first climate change report, thousands of birders in the US asked how could they help? And I don't know about the UK, but I can tell you in the United States, people are avid birders. They are out there birding, no matter what's going to happen, snowstorm, we have to go out there. And this is where I start using my GIS skills. So since 2016, Climate Watch volunteers, which are community members, have collected data that Audubon scientists have used to document in peer-reviewed research that birds are responding to climate change and shifting their ranges. So this is an example of one of the tools that I've collaborated on within my GIS team. It's a survey planner, which essentially allow users to, first of all, kind of look at the data as it currently is. So it's not optimized for this screen currently, but usually you'd have a bigger pop-up that you could look at. So I opened it bigger for all of you. And you can see for that specific point, the count that someone recorded from the community. So as you zoom in to specific areas, you see there's some areas that have been surveyed more than others. And the survey happens by species. So there's a bunch of interactive tool and trainings that go around this tool. It's not just thrown into the hand of the user. There's a lot of training and guidance that come with deploying this tool. And as you can see, it's been widely successful in getting data all over the US. And on this end of the tool, on the Claim a Square, users can themselves go in, turn on whatever species they want to monitor. Let's say it's the eastern bluebird, hit on the square, click edit, and write their name and claim that square. So as part of my team, we want a tool that's easy to use, accessible to all kind of different groups. So this is why we created this tool, and it's been running for a couple of years now, since 2016, and it's been widely successful. And as part of my team, our work is to kind of make sure that this is running smoothly. If users have any issues, to contact us, and we help them kind of navigating this tool. So another quote from C.A. Bastida, from All We Can Say: climate change doesn't discriminate, but the ability to respond to climate disaster does. That's why this quote really resonated with me in that sense, because I felt you know what, if we don't give tools to communities to fight climate change, like we're not going to be able to have an impact, because science cannot be left in a pocket for only the best, brightest scientific mind, because science is curiosity, and that's kind of the pillar. But let's not forget also that Indigenous communities have a lot of scientific knowledge that they've had for years. The term sustainability was not invented by the Western world. It was an integral principle of Indigenous farming techniques and way of living. And I think by giving them those digital platforms, we kind of encourage like them to share that knowledge with a broader world that really, really needs it. So let me see how we're doing on time. Okay, I'm going to present this a bit and then we can take a break. So I'll be like, I'm not talking too much. So this leads to the next phase of the project, which is the Climate Watch Boreal. The boreal forest is one of the largest intact forests left on Earth, and it stretches from Alaska to Labrador, and it provides incredible habitat for stopovers for nearly half of the common bird species found in North America, not to mention the countless other species that live there. The biggest and most ambitious proposal to conserve this area actually came from Indigenous nations. So several Indigenous nations came together and proposed creating Indigenous protected areas that will preserve bird nesting grounds, caribou habitat, wild salmon that run across the boreal. And together, this proposal could protect over 1 million acres of the boreal forest. So highly ambitious. And this is where I come in, again, offering a platform to help facilitate this work, to help this audience, to help this project reach a wider audience. So I'm currently developing the Climate Watch Boreal platform, which allow individuals to learn about the Climate Watch project through a story map. So we are currently using a story map, and I apologize if there's too much jargon. You can post the question in the chat. I will go back over it if it's too much jargon. The next part is the Climate Watch stories, which is my favorite part of the whole project. I will open it. And so did you see the shift in my screen? I just want to make sure you can still see that part, the tool on a wider screen. Is that it? Is that good? Thumbs up. Awesome. So what this tool allows you to do is allow community members to go in the field and populate this survey of what did they see in the forest. It's accessible to anyone. There's paper forms, there's a PDF version of it, and it's not showing up when I'm sharing my screen, but there's also a French version of the survey. So it's a bilingual app, and it allows users to populate this answer. And as they do, I refresh it and it will show up on the map, the details of the observation, what they saw, and the type of observation. This is kind of the main focal point of this project, is this tool around allowing communities to share the story. And the next tool that I really, really enjoy is the Sound of the Boreal Forest, which is still being built, which is essentially a repository of recordings from sounds from the boreal forest that allow users to post pictures and sounds and observation from the boreal forest. So this is a user, the Climate Watch Story is a user-driven tool. So community will populate it, but the Sound of Boreal Forest is only for now we're only collecting data from scientists. So I'll go back to my other screen. Just bear with me. Awesome. So before I do hop into how these tools kind of integrate with my work in Africa and the way forward with it, I do want to take a break. I think it's a good stop point for us to take a break if everyone feels that they want more beer. Yeah, that. Awesome. So now, how does this all feeds into community work in Mauritius and community work in Africa and GIS work. If you want, I was kind of weaving a story for you, my personal story, my work journey in terms of what I've learned in the United States and how that eventually fed back into what I'm doing in Mauritius, and hope to do more in the future in Mauritius and in Africa in general. So it starts with a very, very disastrous event. So on the 1st of August, 2020, the Wakasho oil tanker crashed onto the reef of the southeast reef of Mauritius, which you can see very close to Île aux Aigrettes, where I used to work. And it quickly started to, on the 6th of August, to leak tons of oil into our marine protected area. And that was a really, really hard moment for me, because we're going full circle here. This is where I started my career. This is, you know, I'm in the US. Like I felt really like trapped. I feel like I can't go on the field. I can't be doing anything to help my community. It was difficult. And I really felt like I was powerless. That's the word I'm looking for. Powerless, of like, it's not fair. I'm not in the country. I almost felt like I was abandoning everything that I've worked so hard in Mauritius. And it was really a moment where I was like, I don't know what to do. And this is where I realized I have skills, right? There are people doing things in this community. What are my skills? And what are my key assets? What can I do? What can I bring to the table, even if I'm a million miles away? And this is where I created this first story map, which is entitled like Mauritius, a tropical paradise in distress. And what it does is it highlights the efforts that the Mauritian people like, and I've never seen them band together to try and protect like something that they care about like this in the past. It didn't really matter. We have a lot of race, religious differences in my country. So it was really beautiful to see everyone band together. So in the story map, what I highlighted was like, okay, this is what happened. These are the people on the ground. Those are all volunteers. Those are not officially like qualified individuals to clean this mess. They're just like people spending days in the rain. I wanted to tell my community, especially in the US, and like they didn't know that was happening because it's a million miles away. But I have colleagues in the US who have worked on the BP oil spill, right? They understand this. So I was like, how can I create a tool quickly and put it out there to this community and ask for them to contribute in any way they can, skills, knowledge, donation. So I did tell the story of those people because they are at the forefront of this disaster. And I did also highlight the marine protected areas that are like at threat because of it. So this is where the oil spill happened in red, and the key green protected areas, including the marine park that I didn't highlight in the map, but this whole like lagoon is a marine protected area. And I also did a call to action. So how can you help? Like, what can you do? So you can donate and you can help support this cause and help Mauritians. And another important message was put your safety first. Like, you know, it's not there's huge environmental, but also health impact to just walking in an oil spill and collecting like waste. So take care of yourself, don't take any risk, and contact NGOs that are working on the ground and know how to do the work. Just don't do it alone. This is a community work. And I made a call to action, and slide by us there. I worked with the Mauritius Olive White Isle, but I did wanted to see like, this is what we're gonna lose. And there's a recording of the Olive White Isle song. I wanted to bring all together all these pieces into one unified message so that people knew where to look at. And I shared it within my network. And as I did that, I was contacted by other Mauritians that are also doing GIS work and journalists from Forbes, Nishan Dignarin, and he was like, this is a bigger story than you know. It's a global story. it's not just your story. Like communities around the world and a lot of African islands also, and areas or developing countries areas are affected by the global shipping industry. So this is why I created a second story map called A Global Outcry from Communities Seeking Ocean Justice. And this story map goes beyond like my story. So after the oil spill in Mauritius, this very powerful picture of 47 whales that were found dead on the shore of Mauritius after the oil spill, even though the government claimed that it had nothing to do with the oil spill, just they happened to die. So it was so like hard again. And I was like, this is a bigger story. So I started sharing the different events related to the global shipping industry, starting with a protest, you know, it's all interlinked. Like the Black Lives Matter protest was picking up in the US. Mauritius was happening to also go through the oil spill. So they also took to the streets because there's a huge history of colonialism and oppression there. And that was the spark to a bigger protest for united fronts for the community in Mauritius. So, but not just Mauritius. On the 4th of August, a few days before the wreck in Mauritius, more than 170 people were killed and over 6,000 wounded in the massive explosion that rocked the Lebanese capital because of hazardous material being stuck at the port of Beirut. So Lebanese people also took to the street around the same period in time. Not to mention, there has been regular protests in London from the environmental campaigners and from Extinction Rebellion, eco-hustlers and other groups that call for urgent action from the IMO to cut pollution in the Arctic from the global shipping industry. I started tracking shipping incidents, whatever I could find, right? Like, and I highlighted it on the map and I overlaid it with so the yellow areas are the protected areas that exist around the world. And if you click on the map, it gives you like one of the shipping incident that happened. And the green and blue line are the shipping routes. So there's a significant overlap between like the marine protected areas and natural protected areas and those global shipping routes and those incidents that you can see. This is just a subset of what I could find within a certain period of time. I'm sure there's a lot more that happened that has been buried or is not necessarily super transparent. So I wanted to highlight what disastrous of a timeline it was. It started in Madagascar, where there was a shipwreck that affected the communities down there and also the species. And as I will not go in detail over this timeline, but I will share this term as part of the presentation. And I invite you to go through this timeline, but it kind of highlights a couple, like the key issues that is an issue with the global shipping industry, notably flags of convenience regime, where, for instance, the flag that crashed in Mauritius had a Panama flag. It had never been to Panama. So when it happened that they had to dispatch like any sort of assistance to do anything, it was the responsibility of Panama or like Japan. No one kind of really knew because it was registered in Panama. To ban fossil fuel in ships for all the reasons that we know why. It's highly polluting and it really affects a lot of marine species. To ban dangerous single hull ships that use toxic fuels in the engine. So single hull ships, unlike double hull ships, are more prone to breaks, and so they are more likely to like cause oil spill. And we need stronger policies for marine protection from the global shipping industry and the Institute for Maritime Organization, the IMO. So that was a call to action that invited people to sign the petition and also told the stories of these communities everywhere across the globe, not just Africa, not just Mauritius, but everywhere that was suffering from the global shipping industry. So what I didn't expect is my story map would be seen everywhere in the world. I received 789 views since August from 66 countries, and the story map was nominated for a Storyteller Award by Esri, which means that it will be featured if it wins under Sustainable Development Goals page, which will bring even more attention to the issue of the global shipping industry around the globe. So because of that, like, it was like a key moment for me where I always felt that my work could only be driven by an organization. I always felt that my power was limited to the power that working in a certain nonprofit gave to me, or being affiliated, you know, to certain organizations did. For the longest time, I completely stripped away the own power that I had as an individual, you know, like I had learned a lot along the way, and we all do learn along the way through talks, through exposure, and we underestimate what we can do as individuals because we think we have to be working within an organization. But in this case, I was not working for an organization, but I was definitely working for a network. I knew I had network in Europe. I have a lot of friends that I met that are scattered across Europe. You know, I have friends from New Zealand, Australia, from mainland Africa, and also in the United States. And when it came time to share my story and share my tool, they were there. So it's a combination of like creating this network and creating this network to create change. And I want to read this beautiful quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass, and it's especially centered around Indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teaching of plants from her book. It goes as follows: children, language, lens. Almost everything was stripped away, stolen when you weren't looking because you were trying to stay alive. In the face of such loss, one thing our people could not surrender was the meaning of land. In the settler mind, land was property, real estate, capital, or natural resources. But to our people, it was everything: identity, the connection to our ancestors, the home of our non-human kinfolk, our pharmacy, our library, the source of all that sustain us. Our lands were where our responsibility to the world was enacted. Sacred ground, it belonged to itself. It was a gift, not a commodity. So it could never be bought or sold. These are the meaning people took with them when they were forced from their ancient homelands to new places. And that is something I really resonate with me. I'm a descendant of slave and indentured laborers, stripped away from the motherland several generations back. And I was brought to this new land, my family were brought to this new land, but we care for it. We may be new residents, but I have ownership in my land. So when this resource and not this community of mine was being destroyed, I felt that I had no choice but to voice out and to do something. And that brings me to the individual component of this talk. I think it's often frustrating because we feel like, what can we do really? Like we all have a finite pool of worry, and many of us works in like different sectors or may not necessarily be an environmental conservationist, and you're fighting for your own cause, whatever that may be, or you feel like you don't have the tools to make a change. And I think it is completely okay to feel that way, but I want to also share a more positive message that you don't have to be a GIS person like I am, making maps to make change in the world. You don't necessarily have to create a story map. This is my way of doing this. This is what I created for myself to do an impact, right? And there was a lot of barriers along the way that should have prevented me, down from my identity, from where I came from. And I want to share that there is hope, right? This is more talk about hope than necessarily like a concrete scientific finding. It's a talk centered around this idea of hope. So I'm going to share these 10 things for being a climate activist, which is also from one of the authors of All We Can Say, C.A. Bastida. She's an 18-year-old individuals that's originally from Mexico, and she now lives in the United States, and she was one of the main actors in organizing the school climate strike across the globe. The first one is don't start from scratch. There are hundreds of existing initiatives that you can join. So when I say it does feel like a really daunting task, and that's one thing I do want to say, like Mauritian Wildlife really taught me, the people I met there. We were all so passionate, but we also had very different skills. So it really felt like together, sometime we could take down the world because we had so much passion and so much devotion to those projects. And we were such a huge community, is something that I really felt like. I felt like we were a diverse community and we could do the work. So find a community that is diverse, but that can drive the work. The second one is maintain good communication with your peers and the adult organization you partner with. And this is a difficult one because you may often find yourself in a position where you disagree with those organizations, but change is not going to happen if you stick to the organization that do everything you like. There's a lot of power in productive conflict, right? And think of this on a personal relationship. You have conflict in your relationship. You don't agree with everything your friend, your partner, or your family says to you, but they still provide a supporting structure for a lot of things you do in your personal life. Their guidance, their framework, they're still pillars in your life in one way or the other. The third one is definitely a huge important point for me, is take good care of yourself and others. It's a teamwork here, right? But it's also a self-work. There's a lot of healing and trauma that's been passed down from generation to generation, you know, and whatever identity you relate to, chances is your history have some really dark moments in it, right? May it be like slavery, colonization, sexism, homophobia, discriminations in all sorts and kinds. And as you're pushing your movement forward or working toward an agenda, if you don't take care of yourself, this is not the last priority. Taking care of yourself, I should honestly have put it at the top of your list, because we cannot attempt to quote unquote heal the world if we don't take care of ourselves. So that is something that makes that is a realization that's been huge for me in the last few years, is I carry a lot of intergenerational trauma, and I need to work on those if I am to continue doing the work with BIPOC in environmental justice. So that is something I need to do. The fourth one is make your activism intersectional. So include all stakeholders in your decision-making and don't tokenize. We have a choice. We often feel like we don't have a choice, but we have a choice to include those diverse voices. And honestly, if you ask me, by this point, it's not a choice anymore. It is a priority. ED&I work shouldn't be like an afterthought. It should be at the core of everything we do. It should be the lens of every scientific and conservation work we do, especially when we're working in communities in mainland Africa or African islands. Don't do things the patriarchal way, the racist way, the exhausting way, or any way that excludes marginalized voices just to be efficient and do things fast. I honestly feel like this one is pretty self-explanatory, you know, in a way, but also I do want to say on it is that sometimes we want to feel like we have to cut corners, and it goes back to like ED&I is not an afterthought. It is a pillar of every work that you do or work that you do. At the beginning of this talk, we did a territory acknowledgement or land acknowledgement. And it's important to invite Indigenous people or local people to the table. And remember that Indigenous knowledge is the foundation for addressing the climate crisis. The next one is always convey that individual and structural change are both indisputably necessary. We're not going to make any progress unless we rethink the structure within which we work. It is hard, but no matter how effective we think we are, and in every aspect of our life, I think it is a healthy process to cycle through action and reflection in everything you do in your life, right? Because you want to step back from what you do and reevaluate what you do. This is like a personal thing, but also a professional component is the cycle for action and reflection. The next one is meet people where they're at. Not everyone knows the climate crisis back and forth, explain it and present solution. And this is applicable for any realm of science or the work that you do. If you're trying to convey a message, especially around ED&I, don't throw a lot of technical terms in people's faces and jargon, because you're robbing the important message. And if you're doing a science talk to a wider audience, if you have technical terms that you have to use, it's okay to explain them. You're not dumbing things down. You're just making sure that your audience is understanding it. And this kind of feeds back into use accessible language, right? And you want to talk about issues around greenwashing, environmental racism, green gentrification, and what a just transition mean. So all these points are just example that Tia Bastida shared. I included her Twitter handle if you're interested to follow her. I honestly think there is way more beyond these tips, right, that we can have. I do invite you to check the All We Can Save book. And what I want to say is that this is not, again, like an all-inclusive list. We all have much more power that we give ourselves credit for. You know, we all bring in a very unique identity to the table, regardless of what we identify to. And for BIPOC individuals, for instance, they have often the incredible burden of, you know, doing all the work because they are trying to change the world, a world that is not fair to them, but they are doing all the work. And it's hard, right? Because they tend to burn out and feel fatigued from trying to do this work in this community. And it can really feel alienating and lonely sometimes. So creating community is extremely important. And the other thing I want to say is not saying anything like homophobic or racism, or racist or discriminatory doesn't mean that you're an ally. Being an ally is actively looking for opportunities to be doing environmental work and ED&I work at the same time. So this is what it means to be an ally. And I think there's sometimes this misunderstanding that you're an ally if you're not saying anything. You're not saying any racist word. You're not saying any homophobic word. You're not discriminating against anyone with disabilities or based on socioeconomic status. This is not being an ally. I think it's definitely when you take an active stance, but when you also educate yourself. It is okay not to know the experiences of others, but there's huge amount of resources out there as individuals, but also as scientists. And this is all I've got for you all. I know it's a lot of information on a lot of things that I did just throw at you. And I do want to thank you all for taking the time to be with me today and to listening. And I do invite you to check in my blog where I do talk a lot more about these topics. And that's all I have for you all. And I'm happy to proceed to question if there's any, and I will stop sharing now.
Well, thank you, Vero. That was just incredible and probably the most moving talk we've had, I think. It's hit me right in the gut quite a bit, so I expect there'll be quite a few questions. We'll certainly open it up to be more open in a second, but please do put any questions you've got into the chat box. Yeah, I'm not there. You know, I'm not sure we'd live in a post-colonial world truly, but that I'd never heard before the idea about you're acknowledging Indigenous peoples, and I think that's fantastic. I guess it made me think about quite a few things, including you know, how many nature documentaries you watch where, you know, the white, well-educated producers drop into this land and clearly would be completely useless without the local knowledge, yet don't seem to acknowledge, you know, those peoples very often. Is that the kind of thing that's particularly frustrating to see, or where can we do it better?
Yeah, it's for what I've realized is, you know, a lot of, from my experience in the islands, for instance, there's a lot of projects that the only reason it's actually being glued together is because local people have this knowledge to drive this project, right? And it's the same in the US. But there's some very real hard practical constraint to work in this industry. Salary is one of them, salary compensation. International expertise, for instance, is often like overly valued, right? Instead of creating partnerships where everyone is treated equally on a pay scale, local people are not necessarily paid at the same rate, even though if they would leave the project, the whole project would collapse. But there's this kind of lack of, for me, the biggest thing is the lack of transparency that I've often seen. The real talks about budgets, about why you're paying those people the salary, for instance, right? Salary is one thing. And I think we need to shift the narrative that, you know, science invented it all. And it didn't, because Indigenous communities, and I don't want to speak too much for the US, but from everything that I've read, there's a lot of like ideas around ecology, around network of plants and plant communities that was born and was an integral part of Indigenous like knowledge, right? Medicinal plants. And my grandma, when I was sick, would make me drink those plants. And like to this day, like I never questioned her. I was like, I'm sick, just giving me that plant, I'm just going to drink it. I don't care, like, if you tell me to go to the pharmacy. And this kind of very inherent knowledge, I think being respectful, when you walk into a community, listen first. It sounds like a weird advice and overly simplified, but honestly, listen first. Chances is you may be the quote unquote international expert, but they have a huge depth of knowledge that can help you do better science for them, but also for yourself, right? And even me, as I'm a person of color, I'm from an island, and it is very easy for me to think that if I move to an island in the Caribbean, for instance, that I understand their experiences. I don't. I have a very unique experience, a very unique history. And unless I sit and listen, I'm not going to be effective at my job. So communication and listening is super important, but also giving incentive for those individuals to be like contributing to this, because their livelihoods depend on it, right? It's not just, it's like a very broad debate, you know, about like the salary. I know conservation, there's often this thing about there's not enough money in the sector, but I also think there's not enough transparency around pay scales in the industry. And that's a reality, right?
Very patriarchal approach.
So yeah.
I don't think we give enough credit to, I mean, working in innovation, we don't give enough credit to kind of the how much stuff's been invented through much more tacit knowledge that passed down through generations, not just, as you say, you know, I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry, and a lot of their best ideas have come from looking at traditional medicine, but right the way through to, I've even heard stories from colleagues in Unilever and inventing things to go in, you know, laundry dispensing systems which are based on years of practice from people and how they've cleaned their clothes before washing machines were even invented. You know, there's so much stuff we don't acknowledge in all of this, and yet there's so much more you can still learn from the way people do things. So I mean, I kind of following on from that a bit, there's a question here saying, you know, quite a few people are watching this are scientists, not everyone, but that do work internationally, often with native or indigenous communities. What would you say are our main responsibility when working with partners to make sure things change positively? So you talked about the salary issue, maybe some more, and then to listen, but what can we do to affect positive change?
The other things that come to my mind is definitely understand your implicit bias, understand the assumptions that you carry when you're walking into these communities, right? For instance, to this day, there's this myth of the poor Africa, you know, Africa, or the Africa where like pristine land where there's nothing but lions and zebras running around, as if like, you know, there was no communities that lived there for centuries and were displaced and were taken outside and then found their source of livelihood cut from them. So it is hard to forget that there is 57 African countries, each very unique history, each very unique habitat, a wide biodiversity hotspot that are so different. You know, I experienced this jump going from Mauritius to Seychelles where it was not the same community, same blob of island in the Indian Ocean, different community mindset, different approach, different mentality. I felt like a stranger, right? And I think recognizing that I myself walked into that community with a lot of biases about how the people should be or shouldn't be. And I do want to give a concrete example with that is Seychelles have this reputation for working at their own pace, which was very different from the culture that I've known in Mauritius, which was like go hard or go home on the field, or pretty much like die on the field if you have to, but you got to drive to work, right? And everyone was in it. So we'd work from dusk till dawn and we would do it because we're so passionate. This does not happen in the Seychelles. And I remember thinking like, this is not great. And I started realizing with time, well, I'm judging them with a very Western mindset of what is effective work. Because I started realizing, even though they were only working from 7 to 3, shocking, I know, right? For me, that used to work from like sunrise to sunset. And I realized like, they're actually way more impactful. They had a lot of community work happening where kids came to the park, knew about the trees. I even heard a story about how like a kid reported his parents because he found out they were like hunting for turtles. Like, so that's what I'm telling you. Like at the end of the day, I was judging. This is an implicit bias of myself. Like, what does it mean to be doing good, effective conversation? Like killing yourself on the field or not, you know? And I'm not saying there's not great conservation project happen because of people who were so passionate. But it's a different community. If I don't live by their standards, it doesn't matter what I think productive means, right? If I want to overwork myself, that's my choice. That's not their choice. And that would, I hope that answers your question, Claire. This is kind of.
Well, I think we can all do more. Yeah, well, that's a lesson in there about reflecting more, spending more time reflecting as well and being more effective when you do work. You know, the old story about the cutting down the tree, and he spent the two guys cutting down the tree, and one spent half the time sharpening his axe. So yeah, well, maybe just I think the expansion that would be quite helpful for us is, you know, just talk a bit more about how we can be a good ally and what that means to you. So going into a situation like that, what is it? You know, what can we do really to support the community that is there?
Yeah. So again, it depends for me on you're seeking to be an ally. There's so many different communities and marginalized and oppressed and silenced voices, right? And I don't want to say pick your battle. I don't want to say that, but I do want to say, in the same way that for us to become great scientists or whatever profession you're in, you learn, you educate, and you listen. And again, it might sound like an oversimplified answer, but there's an incredible amount of resources out there like that helps you learn about the real and hidden histories that we're not, you know, that we don't see on our day-to-day life, like listening to the struggles of those oppressed and silent communities, but also going to trainings if you can. And for me, even though my identity, I can't say there's a one thing that I did for ED&I work that helped, but I did create a diverse network, right? And when I was in Mauritius, I met a lot of British people, and I saw the struggle, like, right? I had always this idea that the Western world, it was so easy for them because, you know, they are like in this country, it must be easy for them to get jobs, opportunities. And I experienced their reality that it's not that easy. It's not, being white doesn't open all the doors suddenly for them. They have their own struggle in their own identities of who they are to open doors. So diversifying your network, first of all, like, and there's a good exercise actually for that. And I will try and find it. It's basically take a piece of paper, have different columns about different kind of like gender, identity, socioeconomic status, and then just write down the 10 first person within your personal and professional network that means something to you and helps you. That gives you a good glimpse of like how you relate to your network and who are in your network. And if you're not, there are dedicated training spaces and podcasts, and you know, you don't necessarily have to go knocking on community. Can I be your friend? I just want to know. That's not okay. But definitely making the effort of seeking training. And within my organization, we've had a lot of ED&I issues, but we have spaces to talk about it. For instance, we have affinity groups where we have a person of color affinity group, we have a birdability, which is for individuals with disabilities. We have a women employee resource group, and we give what we call, there's two types of spaces, safe spaces and brave spaces. So what we offer in affinity group is a safe space. So individuals which are identified as this group can come in and talk about their struggles, how they are not struggling with issues within the organization, how the policies and structure of the organization is not helping them, and how they want it to change. And allies often sit on those groups and just listen, because it's their space where they're listening and learning. Brave spaces, on the other hand, are spaces where you invite individuals to talk about, this is our problem. We are underpaying interns and fellows and people of color in our organization. Why is this happening? Let's talk about it. Let's conflict about it. This is a brave space. It's more, it gives a space for productive conflict, right? Because you're like pushing this like hard topic onto people. So yeah, I know it's a lot to take in, and I'm happy to send some books, all the books that I've collected along the way that you want to read. I can send that like in an email to Claire and Mike. So because it's work, it's an education process, right? To get there. And even me, there's days I'm like, I feel like my lens is so heavily focused on BIPOC that I neglect other experiences. And I try to really remember that there's other experiences out there.
Well, what we'll do is we'll take those and we'll post them underneath. I'm going to do this. This is so meta that we're going to post them underneath this video right now. You can see the links right here. They're put there. That's someone's going to do that, not me. Somebody who's a lot more technically skilled than I am. Vera, I kind of want to stop the formal stuff there and really open this up for everyone else. So we're going to stop the recording. Please, everybody unmute, because I really think what we want to do here is offer you a huge and genuine and live round of applause. So thank you so much for opening up for us today.
Thank you.